Hi guys, joy, stay tuned. Me, Cheryl and Norris Hopkins with hashtag no filters number 27. This is going to be insane. In fact, it's entitled, No Way! That stuff's insane. This can't be real. Just going to see if the other device kicks in. We'll see what happens. Guys, big disclaimer. We're going to go down the rabbit hole today. Now, as always, not the truth, not a lie. Take what you want from it. You could just see it as an interesting imaginations like Alice in Wonderland for today's conversation. Not sure how long I'll be on for, but we'll just go with it. So the reason I wanted to entitle this "That's Super Insane," there's no way this is behind everything, is because I've been exploring what's going on in the world. Obviously, I've always questioned what's going on in the world and the way the world's set up, and there's lots of debate about what's going on, blah, 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 blah. But I was like, no, what's really behind why the world's set up the way it is, like in its entirety? What if we looked at that? Hi, Tanya. Thanks for joining, darling. Mwah. Great to have you here. Thanks so much. Guys, please share this if you like it when you get to the end, right? So, what's behind the entire world? And if you're not interested in exploring what that might be and how cray this might sound, get off now because we're going to go there. So I had my mum recently ask me about what's going on in the world and asked me, and I was sharing a little bit about my perspective on it. And she was like, well, why would somebody do that? Why would they do that? And I thought, this could be a great show. So let's go on an adventure. What's the one thing that's common to all species on the planet? The desire to live, express and explore, right? Every species wants to propagate itself. It wants to have an experience. And the human species is no different. And the one thing we all fear? Death, mortality. So let's go back to the beginning of time, whatever that may have been for us as a species. Let's say there was a version of us that wanted obviously to experience itself, and like many things on this planet that we currently experience, and particularly in the human form, there always seems to be somebody that wants a bigger chunk of the pie, right? Wants to take over somewhere, to go to war with somebody, to own a bigger bit of land, to have more profit, whatever. There always seems to be somebody or something that wants to do that. So let's say this species, these beings wanted to, I don't know, have a bigger chunk, or wanted to experience life more. Now, how would you go about this? And I just started to think about how I would go about it because I have this kind of inquisitive mind about what I would do if I wanted to take over the world, right? Or have a bigger slice of the pie. So, well, if I wanted to do that, obviously, I would interbreed with the other species on the planet, like the other human type things. It makes sense to propagate my gene. That's what we do, right? The strongest part of a species wants to propagate its gene at all times. So I would do that. Yeah, makes sense. But how would I actually really take over? Like long-term planning, because I'm like a long-term kind of thing. Now, you can go out and you can start to create war with somebody, but you might lose that battle. So it's not a long-term strategy, is it? So you need to be a little smarter than that. What would I set up? Well, I'd start to set up ways of behaving. I'd start to set up structure. I'd start to set up the concept of community in terms of what we currently express. Look at all our systems: financial, medical, legal, education. Now, we may not have called those, it may not have been called that back in the beginning of time, but it would make sense, wouldn't it, to have like ways of behaving and getting people to start to think the same, to do the same. So I'd set up society to be that. But on a day-to-day level, I wouldn't want to be seen as the one that was trying to propagate these ideas. Now, we have loads of ideas, don't we? We propagate things through education. We have people who have different views about education. We have people who have different views about religion. We have people who have different views about medicine. We've got all these different perspectives. But if you really wanted to be like the top of the tree, you don't want to put your face out there and be seen all the time. You want to kind of be a bit more in the shadows. So you might sort of, I don't know, you might hang back a bit. You might even live underneath the surface of the planet. Yeah, great. Sounds insane, doesn't it? Although we do have deep underground military bases, which are called DUMBs, which are interesting. So you kind of keep in the shadows more, probably out of view, but you'd like to be able to pull strings, because if you want to take over and be like the leading family, the leading race, you need to make sure everybody agrees to follow that plan, which means you need certain people to do things for you, which is the way we do. We have hierarchical structures on this planet, don't we? In industries, in cultures, in religion. We have all these kind of top-down control and command structures, which, let's be honest, most of us don't really enjoy being in those. It's not really a natural state for us. What is it? So let's say you're behind the shadows and you're pulling strings and you're creating these concepts of community and structures in community, and getting people to conform to think in the same way. And how do we currently do that? Well, in our mainstream society today, we do that through our education, obviously. We do that also through the concept of our legal system, that if you don't comply with certain behaviors, you get punished. We do it in our reward system of the concept of finance. We'll give you more money if you get a certain level of education and you achieve a certain thing, you think a certain way, you deliver a certain outcome, you get rewarded for it. If you don't, we've all been through assessment at work, for performance and things like that, particularly if you're a corporate kiddie. That's a really big thing, performance reviews. Everybody gets taught if you're a good egg, as you fit into a nice square box, you're more likely to get on well, and or at least not get booted out or pushed to the side so much. So you propagate the idea of reward, and you propagate the idea of punishment, and you make sure people, and you trigger people's systems, right? So it's really easy to trigger people's fear through the aspect of being punished, and it's very easy to trigger people's desire to be rewarded. So you start to kind of create that as an aspect of society, and we have that throughout every bit of our society. And so this continues to grow, right? And as we breed, as we interbreed, we start to spread out over the planet. Our numbers expand, 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 expand. So you start to think, well, how do I, with us growing in numbers, how do I now control even more of those numbers? As we evolve. And as we've evolved, you think about it, technology has evolved, right? Our way of interacting with each other has evolved. Now, this might seem a bit crazy. I'm trying to kind of explore what was going through my mind when I was thinking about this. I'm doing my best, guys. You don't have to listen, but it kind of leads somewhere quite interesting. So technology is a great way of like keeping track of people and spreading a certain message. And if you think about it, also at the beginning of time, if we were on one bit of land and there were other clans or beings and different bits of land across the world, well, we wouldn't have had communication with them anyway. So you wouldn't be able to conquer them at that time. So it would have had to be a long-term plan, wouldn't it? So as we started to travel, and we started to have ways of communicating over time, we'd have been able to become aware of what else we could conquer. So if you think about technology, what was some of the things that we've created, or at least have appeared in our day-to-day reality? Radio. Radio was a great way of getting messages out, broadcasting a message. And if you broadcast a message enough, people start to, well, do one of two things. They start to either believe it, or they might push and oppose it. But either way, they're kind of tied to that message, right? Which is kind of what's going on in the world all the time. And particularly at the moment, there are people that really agree with what's going on, and those that are like starting to revolt and push back. But either way, they're kind of pushing against the same narrative, which is, here's a storyline, get people on side, or have them battling it, but you still got them tied and kind of distracted. And that's the art of warfare, isn't it? If you're going to take over somewhere, keep people distracted. So let's say we had radio developing and we were broadcasting this message. So slowly more and more people were starting to buy into a way of thinking, a way of behaving. And you have to give people a reason for living as well. So within our societal structures, the idea of creating education and giving us jobs and giving us entertainment, or us creating entertainment, gives us something to do. I've always thought it's kind of weird. Like, what was the point of being on this planet when I was a kid? I was like, is that all there is to do? Go to school, get a job, get, earn money, buy a house, car, go on holiday, eat, drink, die? Is that it? And I was like, I don't think so. That doesn't seem right to me. And if it is, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to follow that straight route. So let's continue this mad rabbit hole. exploration I'm having here, guys. And the reason I'm doing it is because I think you might find something in this, and you might not. It might explain why the whole of our society and the whole of our planet is set up the way it is, and what's going on within the planet right now, or on the planet. Because if you stay at the surface level of, oh, there is an illness, no, there isn't. Oh, there is this political party trying to take over the world. There is this country trying to take over, or not. You can get distracted. So I wanted to go back to the beginning of time and why a species wants to be here and what it's trying to do. So as the species continues to send out its messages, right, through radio, and then we got television, which is an even better way of broadcasting the message, isn't it? Because if you think about it right now, the only reason anybody knows anything's going on the planet invariably is through our visual media, TV, television, online web broadcasting, doesn't matter what it is. And obviously we also have entertainment, which is a great way to tell a story. And if you've ever noticed, a lot of our films, particularly sci-fi films, I think they kind of hint to what's already going on and or where we might be being led. Maybe not, but I see a lot of themes going through that. What about you? So we continue this broadcasting of a message. We continue this giving people something to do, and slowly but surely, and we get various people to disseminate this information and keep society running, right? We could call them our political leaders. We could call them the lobbyists behind politicians, which are often big corporates. Big corporates basically provide a lot of money, and a lot of industries provide a lot of money to governments. And right now, a lot of our lockdown money probably isn't just coming from your taxes, put it that way. And I do believe there was a politician that mentioned it recently that if they didn't actually put certain measures down to restrict people's movement, they'd run out of money. It's like, that's weird. Wait a minute. You're saying you'd run out of money if you don't restrict people's movement, but no one's working? Why would you run out of money unless somebody's giving you money? Bizarre. So you continue to have these people pulling strings for you because that's the best way. It's like any army, got the guy at the top, general, whatever it is, and gets everybody else to do the work. The hierarchical structure, same as corporates. You get everybody else to do the work, and you're behind the scenes controlling things. You're not out in the field getting shot at, are you? Not a foot soldier. So as you continue, and the world continues to breed, right? We've gone from, let's say, a handful of people, I'm guessing, to 7 billion, 8 billion. And again, remembering that every species wants to propagate, it wants to explore, some want to dominate, right? They want to take over a bigger slice of the pie. So let's say this species, the beginning of us, has been wanting to do that, and it's been breeding and blah, 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 blah. So now we've got 7 or 8 billion of us on the planet. How are you gonna, I mean, we've kind of got a bit out of control, right? How do you kind of take over that many people? How do you take over the whole planet as it's continued to expand with the number of species on it or number of humans on it? Just go with this, guy. Just go with it, or not. Jump off. Well, yeah, you've got people to think a certain way by setting up society. You've got them used to messaging through broadcasting, and that, as we all know, the more we see something, the more we believe it, right? Or we won't push against it, but people do believe what they see in media. Or they question it, but it's a sort of bouncing off point. So how do you speed that up? Well, we all use these lovely little devices. I mean, I started, where are we now? It's 2021. So about 1991, I had my first mobile phone, and that was pretty rare. People didn't really have many of them. You think about it now, actually everybody on the planet's got one to varying degrees, right? So it's a good way of keeping people updated, disseminating information, tracking people. By the way, I used to program software for these. We can track you. We track you. As you know, you are tracked all the time, right? So I can kind of keep a track of what people are doing. I can influence them. As you know, you get advertising on your phones, etc. But I still haven't quite got a grab of all of you because we've read so much. It's kind of almost run away from itself, right? So how do I get even more control over all of you? And we know there's this thing about humans have this thing about controlling their own lives, controlling people that are in our lives, controlling the financial sector, how much money we have. Companies want to control a bigger chunk of the pie. We're constantly assess about how well we're doing. Yeah, there's this underlying theme of like control and having more. Where did that come from, guys? Where did it come from? So as this continues, we've got these phones that enable us to kind of track and influence people more. But what would be the next jump from that? And you see this a lot being talked about in terms of industry evolution, technological evolution. You see it in movies. This whole thing about combining us with AI, right? We have, I don't have, but a lot of people have things like Alexa in their house, a lot of smart meters. Things are, you start to get used to being aligned, having tech nearer and nearer and nearer and closer, closer, closer to you, right? And in movies, we talk about tech being implanted in people, and we have tech to some degree. In some people do have tech, as in they have sort of bionic legs and arms added. But there's this thing about splicing us with technology that's being talked about more and more and more, whether it is chipping us, whether it's having a keyboard put on us. And that was a great thing. We saw there was a little video from the Microsoft guys recently about having tech like a keyboard on our hand. There are people who do actually have chips in them where they use them to enter buildings. I think there's some people in the States that already have that in their bodies. We've talked about having chips in obviously we have them in our passports. We've talked about now having them in what's going on around the world. So there's this theme about us being integrated more of tech. Our vehicles respond to us with our keyless fobs, keyless entry, even touch entry. There's more and more of us being integrated with machines being talked about and being proposed because machines are deemed to be efficient, right? Which is interesting. I'm a former engineer, so I've kind of got this geeky part of me that looks about the efficiency of how things work. But there's nothing I've ever come across that really is able to replicate the human, the creative aspect of us that can see things beyond any machine device can, even AI. So in a weird way, we're like the super beings. But anyway, I'm diving off. There's too many paths I could go down here, guys. I'm going to bring it back to this. So we've got this tech thing, and it's expanding. There's this agenda about us being combined with AI more and more and more. But if you said to people, hey, yeah, let's just combine you with AI, let's just put chips in everybody. We've already had people freaking out about the idea pre this illness, pandemic, what you would call that. We've already had people saying, no, we don't want digital ID cards on us all the time or any kind of real tracking like we have in China. People in the West kind of freak out about that. But slowly it's been creeping up, isn't it? CCTV, say we obviously track by our phones. It's kind of creeping up more and more. So we've got used to it a bit more. And that's how you take over anything, isn't it? If you want to take over, if you want to basically dominate an area, if you try and rush in and take over, people notice. But if you're kind of it's like when an animal hunts another animal, often they're like stealth, like they slowly creep up on it. They take a moment, the prey looks around but adjusts and realizes that maybe they're under threat. And then when they see no movement, they relax. I've watched this with like big cats and antelope, for example. And you see them do this. They kind of, the antelope looks up to see if they're being stalked, doesn't see any movement, relaxes, carries on munching, and the lion continues. And that's the same with Hitler. It was said that, sorry, a bit of a jump there, but not really. How was he able to create such a movement and encourage people to actually buy into the concept of destroying a whole set of people? Well, by slowly getting them to give up bits of their freedom, give up, or start to see the world a different way, a day at a time. If you rush people into something new, they bulk at it from a sense of security. But if you slowly integrate something and bring it in, bit at a time, it's easier to do, right? So I've been kind of thinking about the technology and where we're going with that. And what's the ultimate technology? What would be the ultimate thing that you could have everybody on the planet buy into, and therefore you could have ultimate control of them in any way you wanted to? And if you wanted to be the dominant species or the dominant force on the planet, and therefore you've got to conquer everybody, you need to make sure everybody has this bit of tech. Phones is a great step. Chipping people is cool, but if there are people that rebel against that, you kind of have to do it in a way they're not aware. And the only thing that people have with them all the time is their body. You have your body with you all the time. It's the one thing that you carry with you wherever you go. Right? Whether you believe that you're just a body or that you're multidimensional, which means you have access to different aspects beyond the five senses. Hey, we can have a whole conversation here about that. And when I mean multidimensional, if you think about it, there's the reason you perceive anything. A table has a different frequency vibration to a chair, to the color red, to my voice. Right? There's all these different frequency ranges. There's all these things that exist in different ways. This appears solid. A table appears solid. Water doesn't when it's in liquid form. Right? There's different frequencies. So we have access to different frequencies anyway. However, back to this kind of body thing. Your body is like the ultimate technology. If I can get in your body, I can ultimately control you. Right? It's like the brilliant plan. This is like the long-term sloth plan. I can take over the world by taking over you. So how do I get into all your bodies on the planet? Well, I need to get you to think and believe that your bodies, your mortality, remember at the beginning I said the two things that we as humans desire, or any species, propagation of our species, and for some reason the desire to take over is something that's in some of us, not all of us, or in varying degrees, let's say. And the other thing is the fear of mortality, death, right? Which I did an awesome show on 2 weeks ago. Go check that out. 1 hour lockdown, face death. Go check it. So if I can get in your body with tech, which means I can control you, which is what we see in so many of these movies, right? Then I've won the game. I've like taken over the whole planet, right? It's like the ultimate long-term game. So how do I get that tech in your body? Well, I have to get you thinking that your body is in threat somehow, under threat. What have we got on the current thing going on in the world? We have a worldwide pandemic. It's like brilliant. We have a worldwide pandemic, and everybody, a lot of people believe that their life is in danger. And so what's being offered right now? This is just genius. And remember, this could be just me having ramblings with my creative imagination. Maybe it's not. See what resonates. Yeah, I can give you so-called inoculation to help you stay alive right now, to reduce your risk of getting something. But in giving you inoculation, I can get something in your body. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm not claiming anything I'm saying here is the truth or not the truth. I just thought it'd be really fun to explore this narrative. But let's say I could do that. Let's say I could get something in your body by giving you a jab. And then, if you know anything about communications, say I used to program software for mobile phone industry. Mobiles work because there's a signal carried from cell to cell, region to region, and with antenna towers. Obviously, there's a whole thing about the evolution of our mobile phones and going from 4G to 5G. That's a whole thing we could explore, which is actually kind of ties into this, but we're going to ignore that for now. But obviously, it also bounces off satellites. So if I've got something in your body and I've got a satellite, and one, I know where you are, but I can also beam messages to you. So we used to use radio. We used to use, I don't know, sitting around the fire telling stories. We pass messages by having laws. We pass messages through tech like radios and television, and now the internet. It should be the ultimate way of passing messaging across a whole planet at any one time, literally. And if I have a piece of tech in you that I can then bounce off from satellites, and also if I've got a bit of tech in you, having program software, by the way, software will do and change the system in which it's in, right? It controls the system. So if I have a bit of tech in you, call it a chip, I can program that chip. I can give it command. And by the way, if you don't realize, your body is electromagnetic, right? It will respond to software programming. ones and zeros, zero, you know. So I could actually control every human on the planet by putting a chip in them and basically having software, an operating system, like you have on your laptop or on your phone, Android, um, and control everybody on the planet through that. Now that's what that means. And then I could turn people on and off, which would be interesting, which actually kind of ties into the whole depopulation agenda that's quite out there with major people, well-known people talking about it, that we're overpopulated. I'm not saying that's what people are planning on doing, but it's been spoken about. And that would be the ultimate long-term game, wouldn't it? Now, what I've just shared might seem totally insane and just like the ramblings of me. And I did speak at quite a pace today because my brain's like, how do I put this out in a way that even makes sense? And maybe it is just some crazy imagining. And maybe it's not. Just think, wouldn't it be the ultimate game? And why would you even do that? My mum was asking me about this. I didn't go through this scenario with her, by the way, not to this degree. I just talked about corporates, wanting bigger market shares and why certain industries aren't really interested in your health and well-being. Frankly, if they keep you sick, they make more money out of you. And she was like, well, why would they do that? I'm like, just for profit. She was like, but what kind of people would do that? I'm like, well, I guess you kind of would say that people that do that aren't necessarily there for the well-being of humanity. So maybe if that's in them, and we often tend to think of people that aren't really interested in the well-being of humanity as being a little bit psychotic, stroke, narcissistic, stroke, and we kind of tend to think they're the extremes. So what if there was so where would that have come from? Where would that part of that DNA would have come from? Like, what if that was part of what was already there at the beginning? And for some people that's evolved, and for others of us it hasn't. So maybe there's more than one species on the planet when we started. Maybe we weren't from apes, monkeys, or whatever. Obviously, other things pre to that. Maybe there are multiple versions of human type things here, and it isn't quite the Darwinian evolution cycle we've been told. I slightly digress, but not really. Yeah, it would be the ultimate game plan, wouldn't it? To take over a planet or to be the dominated species, to do a long-term game. And to be able to take over everywhere, you have to get everybody believing in one system. But you also need to keep them distracted, which means why we have different views, and give people something to aspire to. But slowly but surely, the ultimate way to take over every human without the inability to actually go to war with everyone on the planet, which you couldn't do. I mean, now we have obviously weapons where we could destroy the whole planet. But even then, we'd probably have some people survive. And there's probably enough safeguards in place where we try and stop each other destroying the planet, don't we? So it's had to be a kind of slow creep, hasn't it, really? And that technological path and getting us on the technological path more and more and more, which has grown massively fast in the last even 5 years, is a brilliant way of completing that timeline, that game plan. So, guys, I just thought it'd be kind of fun to share that because there's lots of talk about what's going on and lots of agendas and China's trying to take over the world, yeah, whatever. Or it's one political party against another, or it's this strain of a virus or another. No, let's go deeper. Let's go right back to the beginning of every species, what the idea of every species is on this planet. Propagation, survival of the fittest, it wants to dominate, if nothing else, just to explore. And therefore, how do you take over the whole planet? And I think I explored that just now. It's a bit nuts, isn't it? But I reckon if you come back listen to this, maybe, I don't know, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, you might be like, oh shit, there's some truth in that. Or maybe not. Guys, it was fun just following my crazy mind and putting stuff out there for the fun of putting it out there. Listen to it a few times. Start to ask yourself, wait a minute, and start to go through all the things that are in your life, all the systems that are in your life, all the components of your life, and start to think, actually, Is that about my freedom or is it about my control? Is the education system about freedom or is it about control? Is the concept of work about freedom, about control? Does medicine heal my body or not? As in, do I get healthier and healthier and healthier and come off it or do I not? Yeah. And if you look at who currently kind of runs most of the world right now, whilst the world is shut down, the companies are doing really well. The food supply chain, because if you get people, like you start to make people hungry, as in don't give them too much food, which may happen by the way, people go kind of psycho, right? Get hangry. You get people rioting over food. So you need to keep people, as you try and take over a species, if you cut off its chain of like food, which is survival, it gets pissed. So you can't do things suddenly. So you've got the food supply still open, and you've got communication still open, right? All communication still open, whether it's the media, whether it's the web, whether it's our devices. They're the things you've still got open. And the only reason you know anything's going on the planet right now is because of the communication channels and your tech, which is giving you updates all the time. And there's only a handful of people that really control all the big tech in the world, which is quite efficient. Again, that hierarchical structure of how you control people. You have a few controlling the many. Think about that, guy. A few controlling the many. But if the many suddenly become aware of what's going on, the many can overpower the few. So as crazy as this might seem, and I say crazy because I know most people might think, what are you talking about, Cheryl? And I could have put this together in a totally different way. There were so many ways I could have explored this idea, but I just thought, just go with it. Hashtag no filters. Simon's just put a message. I'll put that up on here, Simon, and read it out in a moment. But yeah, it's the perfect thing. So you think you're blaming your politicians maybe, or the government's pulling all the strings right now. Puppeteers. Who's behind the puppeteers? Governments get lobbied by industries. That's cool. That's further up the command chain, isn't it? Who's behind those lobbying industry? Who's behind all of that? Because it's not about country, religion. That keeps you distracted, remember? But there's people behind industry as well. So who's behind industry? Right? You could say it's some powerful families. And who's behind them? Maybe we'll find out. Maybe they're not quite what you think they are. Maybe all of us aren't quite what you think you are. You're going to find out some interesting stuff about your DNA. She says, our evolution is not what we've been told. But that could just be my imaginings. Let me see what Sam has to say on here. He's come back about his COVID test. His test was negative. It was going with me until he said about, right, so Sam was basically saying, you can read it on the screen. His COVID test was negative. He was going with me until I started talking about putting chips in people's bodies to control people. And that being about one way of taking over the world. Does sound a bit far-fetched, but interesting. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. But actually not that difficult to do, really. But that's okay. It doesn't have to be the truth. We're going to see this wonderful adventure we're all on unfold, and then we'll look back and we'll go, what the bloody hell was that? Maybe there was a lot more truth in all the things we saw in our movies and in some of the stuff I've shared here today than we ever realized. And maybe not, and that's okay. If nothing else, if this gave you a bit of a laugh, that's great. If it gave you some food for thought and maybe it's got you going, well, actually, some of those thoughts are my thoughts. I think a bit like that. Then maybe we're all just cray-cray, or maybe we're not. And also, Tanya, thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining me, Tanya. I really appreciate that. Yeah, maybe share this with some people. If nothing else, it might make light of the situation of what's going on in the world and give you a bit of a distraction. Or it actually might give people some kind of like insights, which is what this show is really about. Right? Hashtag no filters, tips, insights, food for thought, to give you a bit more ease, a bit more freedom. If for some reason we are actually attempting to have people control the world more and more, which we do have as a literal thing, it is happening. We do have more and more control structures being put in place at this moment in time, restricting all of us, and we all have different views about what that is. Let's go back to that hierarchical structure. Um, 7 billion, 8 billion of us on the planet, allegedly. We don't really know, but let's say there are. I mean, I don't know how many people there really are. I've never counted them all. But it seems to be quite a few of us. We're not at the effect of everything, guys. On a slightly more serious note, although I don't like to be that serious. You might think you've got no choice. You have so much choice and so much power for one you can imagine. Because you think about it, if there are all these things going on in the shadows, and even if you don't believe the idea that there's one species at the beginning of time that may have been multiple species and interbreeding was trying to control us all and take us all over, and AI is going to take us all over. Even if you think that's insane, that's fine. There are still those who do want to have a bigger slice of the pie. We see that in day-to-day life. And a lot of people do hide behind their title or behind a structure that's been put in place, like the concept of law. But fundamentally, if 7 billion people go, I don't think so, I don't care what structures are in place, what systems are in place. It's like, have you ever seen a dam? You know, dams crack. They hold back an immense amount of water, but they do crack eventually. Because water always finds a way through. And humans are kind of like water. We always find a way through. And guys, right now, if you feel like you've got no choice, you feel like you're being dammed up and you're just being held back in your life, just keep looking for those little splashes of inspiration or those bits of questioning. That's you. That's you starting to find a way through with this cray. And on this, I say this channel on YouTube. I mean, joyfulbodies.co.uk is the link I'm starting to use to say to people, go to that, and it will be in the description. Because at some stage, my videos may not be on YouTube, or I might have it all on a website, or there might be links to audio files. It might not be on social media at all times. So if you use Joyful Bodies, JOYFULBODIES, joyfulbodies.co.uk as a link to bookmark to pass to people. They'll always get directed to wherever the stuff is, and that become able to see what's going on. There's some cool videos on here, guys, that might start to give you food for thought about how we've been conditioned, educated to think a certain way. Go look at the playlists, go look at those. And as we go forward, I'm going to start doing some videos about getting you to think about what you actually want to create for your future. Because it doesn't matter what you believe about what's going on, there are going to be changes. And if we go down the narrative that I perceive, and again, you don't have to believe this, that we are all starting to wake up to such a degree that we're starting to see that agenda that wanted to, quote, quote, take over the world, or those that do want to have more control, which has happened. That's happening more and more on a general day-to-day mainstream level, right? Certain companies want to have more of a share. As we're seeing, there are certain companies that have grown so big during our lockdown, and little businesses have folded. They're in those industries. So if nothing else, in that mainstream economics, there are those who are getting a bigger chunk of the slice of the pie, more and more and more. So we're going to have to start thinking about how we create our lives and what we do going forward, irrespective of how this all plays out. So I'm going to start putting some videos together or doing these little chats and just starting to get you to think about what you want to create in the future. And if you did create the world in a different way, because we talk about leaders, what they should and shouldn't be doing, people complain about politicians. Well, how would you like to run the country? How would you like to run the world? How would you like to run your neighborhood? How would you like to run your own life? If no one else was in charge and it was all down to you. Because for somebody or something to want to take over the way you see the world, your perspective, which is what television's about, marketing's about, that means they have to get you to give, you have to give them your power. You have to agree. You are way more powerful than you may even realize, guys. You are so amazingly powerful. Everything in society is set up to get you to give up that power, to look outside yourselves, right? To conform to an idea of how you should live, which basically says you're more potent than all the systems that we have in place. And on that note, let's wrap up for today. You're more potent than you realize. You are the most potent thing on this planet. You're going to ride this in a way you've not even realized, right? And I'm going to invite you to explore that more and more and more and more. We could spend all day talking about what's going wrong, what's going on. That's a distraction, but I thought it'd be fun to take this ride about what might have happened on this planet, what might be. Take it with a pinch of salt. Guys, thanks for joining. Catch you later.